Hello, my name is Ter Scott. I am the Life and Legacy Coach. I'm teaching people how to live a life and to leave a legacy. Thank you so much for joining me today. And this is a series of how to get rich. And I'm using the book, The Science of Getting Rich by W.D. Waddles. And what I will do is I'm going to read each chapter over a series of time, and then I'll discuss the chapter, and I'll just add my thoughts to it and my experience. And then I will leave you with an assignment after each one of our visits. And while you're listening to me as I read each chapter, I hope that you'll listen to it with a pen in hand and paper on your desk so that you can jot down ideas and even questions. And there's a way that you can contact me, and then in the contact box or wherever you're seeing this, and you can actually leave your comments and questions, and I invite that. And the big thing is the inspiration, the ideas, the things that you can do as you hear me speak the words of W.D. Waddles from his book, The Science of Getting Rich. When you hear things, it's going to apply to you and your life today and what you're doing. Now, if you were listening to my words, my speaking, my reading of W.D. Waddles' thoughts and words here, The Science of Getting Rich, if you had been listening to this last week, you would be coming up with different things because it would have applied to you living last week. Listening to this right now is going to apply to you right now. And also a little bit as you're planning for the future. It doesn't apply to your future, but it applies to what you're doing right now. And right now starts your future. So I'm going to start reading the first chapter, and then I'll come back and I will comment on this particular book. And now it's an interesting thing too about this book is that this was really the inspiration, this was the start that got Rhonda Burns excited about creating that movie, The Secret. And because of that, then The Secret and this sort of thought has really expanded, and it has helped a lot of people. But I think still there's a lot of people that have studied The Secret and they're not even aware that this is the book that her daughter gave her with the X's and O's on it. So anyway, let's get to the first chapter. Well, I guess before we do that, let's go to the preface. And I, as an author myself, I really appreciate the preface of books. And when I was in high school and college, number one, I didn't like to read as a college, well, as a student in high school. I really thought that I should get out there and make my own adventures. I thought that was my excuse anyway, or my reason. But then when I was in college, I was more hungry to read books, and especially these types of books. And so the preface to me is really the thoughts of the author, and it's the preparation of what this author's thoughts are for the entire book. It's almost like the summary that comes at the end of the book, and this is the foreshadowing. So anyway, here's the preface. This book is pragmatical, not philosophical, a practical manual, not a treatise upon theories. Now, it is intended for the men and women whose most pressing need is for money, who wish to get rich first and philosophize afterward. It is for those who have so far found neither the time, the means, nor the opportunity to go deeply into the study of metaphysics, but who want results and who are willing to take action, to take the conclusions of science as a basis for action, without going into all of the processes by which those conclusions were reached. It is expected that the reader will take the fundamental statements upon faith, just as he would take statements concerning a law of electrical action if they were promulgated by a Marconi or an Edison, and taking the statements upon faith, that he will prove their truth by acting upon them without fear or hesitation. Every man or woman who does this will certainly get rich, for the science herein applied is an exact science, and failure is impossible. For the benefit, however, of those who wish to investigate philosophical theories and so secure a logical basis for faith, I will here cite certain authorities. The monistic theory of the universe, the theory that one is all and that all is one, that one substance manifests itself as the seeming many elements of the material world, is of Hindu origin and has been gradually winning its way into the thought of the Western world for 200 years. It is the foundation of all the Oriental philosophies and of those of Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Schopenhauer, Hegel, and Emerson. The reader who would dig into the philosophical foundations is advised to read Hegel and Emerson, and he will do well to read The Internal News, a very excellent pamphlet published by J.J. Brown, 300 Cart Road, Govanhill, Glasgow, Scotland. He may also find some help in the series of articles written by the author, which were published in Nautilus, Holyoke, Massachusetts, during the spring and summer of 1909, under the title, What is Truth? In writing this book, I have sacrificed all other considerations to plainness and simplicity of style, so that all might understand. The plan of action laid down herein was deduced from the conclusions of philosophy. It has been thoroughly tested and bears the supreme test of practical experiment. It works. If you wish to know how the conclusions were arrived at, read the writings of the authors mentioned above, and if you wish to reap the fruits of their philosophies in actual practice, read this book and do exactly as it tells you to do. The author. Chapter 1. The Right to be Rich. Whatever may be said in praise of poverty, the fact remains that it is not possible to live a really complete or successful life unless one is rich. No man can rise to his greatest possible height in talent or soul development unless he has plenty of money. For to unfold the soul and to develop talent, he must have many things to use, and he cannot have these things unless he has money to buy them with. Man develops in mind, soul, and body by making use of things, and society is so organized that man must have money in order to become the possessor of things. Therefore, the basis of all advancement for man must be the science of getting rich. The object of all life is development, and everything that lives has an inalienable right to all the development it is capable of attaining. Man's right to life means his right to have the free and unrestricted use of all the things which may be necessary to his fullest mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment, or in other words, his right to be rich. In this book, I shall not speak of riches in a figurative way. To be really rich does not mean to be satisfied or contented with a little. No, man ought to be satisfied with a little if he is capable of using and enjoying more. The purpose of nature is the advancement and unfoldment of life, and every man should have all that he can contribute to the power, elegance, beauty, and richness of life. To be content with less is sinful. The man who owns all he wants for the living of all the life that he is capable of living is rich, and no man who has not plenty of money can have all he wants. Life has advanced so far and become so complex that even the most ordinary man or woman requires a great amount of wealth in order to live in a manner that even approaches completeness. Every person naturally wants to become all that he is capable of becoming. This desire to realize innate possibilities is inherent in human nature. We cannot help wanting to be all that we can be. Success in life is becoming what you want to be. You can become what you want to be only by making use of things, and you can have the free use of things only as you become rich enough to buy them. To understand the science of getting rich is therefore the most essential of all knowledge. There is nothing wrong in wanting to get rich. The desire for riches is really the desire for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life. And that desire is praiseworthy. The man who does not desire to live more abundantly is abnormal. And so the man who does not desire to have more money enough to buy all that he wants is abnormal. There are three motives for which we live. We live for the body, we live for the mind, and we live for the soul. No one of these is better or holier than the other. All are alike desirable, and no one of these three, the body, the mind, or soul, can live fully if either of the others is cut short of full life and expression. It is not right or noble to live only for the soul and deny the mind or body, and it is wrong to live for the intellect and deny the body and soul. We are all acquainted with the loathsome consequences of living for the body and denying both the mind and the soul. And we see that real life means the complete expression of all that man can give forth through body, mind, and soul. Whatever he may say, no man can really be happy or satisfied unless his body is living fully in every function, and unless the same is true of his mind and his soul. Wherever there is unexpressed possibility or function not performed, there is unsatisfied desire. Desire is possibility seeking expression or function seeking performance. Man cannot live fully in body without good food, comfortable clothing, and warm shelter, and without freedom from excessive toil. Rest and recreation are also necessary to his physical life. He cannot live fully in mind without books and time to study them, without the opportunity for travel and observation, or without intellectual companionship. To live fully in mind, he must have intellectual recreations and must surround himself with all the topics, the objects of art and beauty he is capable of using and appreciating. To live fully in soul, man must have love, and love is denied expression by poverty. Man's highest happiness is found in the bestowal of benefits on those he loves. Love finds its most natural and spontaneous expression in giving. The man who has nothing to give cannot fill his place as a husband or father, as a citizen or a man. It is in the use of material things that man finds full life for his body, develops his mind, and unfolds his soul. It is therefore of supreme importance to him that he should be rich. It is perfectly right that you should desire to be rich. If you are a normal man or woman, you cannot help doing so. It is perfectly right that you should give your best attention to the science of getting rich, for it is the noblest and most necessary of all studies. If you neglect this study, you are derelict in your duty to yourself, to God, and to humanity. For you can render God and humanity no greater service than to make the most of yourself. So that's chapter 1. And again, this has been written some years ago. So these are words, some of these words, especially in the preface, these are places and words and people that I'm not familiar with so much yet. And that's why I kind of stumbled on the pronunciation. I will say this though, if I were to speak in public and do a presentation, a speech, I would certainly know the correct pronunciation of those names. But I'm going to make a comment about that in a little bit as well too. But first of all, I'd like to get way to the very beginning of this. And I'm actually looking at a hardcover blue book, The Science of Getting Rich. And I really love the look of these old type of books. And this has just a very, very simple work. And it's just a simple design, The Science of Getting Rich, and it's outlined in a box. And then we see a picture of Wallace D. Wattles. And then again, the title page, The Science of Getting Rich. And he was the author of The New Science of Living and Healing. And the price of this hardcover book way back in 1910, when it was published, was only $1. Pretty interesting. Now, I really appreciate, sometimes I do buy, I find really great books in old bookstores and even thrift stores. So I really appreciate visiting those and finding these gems, such as this, The Science of Getting Rich. But this book, like I said before, has so many wonderful things that have come from this. So it has 17 different chapters, and I will read and I will address and I will give an assignment for each one of these chapters. But talking a little bit about the preface, is Wallace Wattles was talking about how this is just information for people that want to get started right now. And he talks about doing this on faith. And so many people in life, the reason why they're not rich, and not only in money, but they're not rich in so many different things, because they don't do things by faith. They want to see it first. And so he is telling us here, get away from that. Don't think that, oh, well, who are you to say, to tell me this information? Or who are you? Are you some big expert or whatever? Or show me proof and that sort of thing. Well, that's fine. If you're that kind of a person, leave. Don't read anymore. And I'm telling you the same thing. We're going to be sharing at least 17 different visits. And if you feel that this is just not going to work for you, well, it's not going to work for you then, because you're saying that it is not going to work. And he talks about, if you could just take these statements upon faith, just as you realize that when you turn on the light switch in your room, that the light's going to come on. And back then it was Marconi and Edison that were coming up with these incredible inventions at that time. And now in our day, we look back, and in the last 100 years, there have been so many inventions, and this was 1909. So imagine from 1909 to 2009, inventions and the way of life and everything has just changed exponentially over and over and over again. And so he's talking about these different people and the Oriental philosophies and things. And he mentions that it really is of a Hindu origin. And but I think as a Christian, obviously, this universal mind that God created everything. He created this universal library. And it may have been that the Hindus maybe picked up on this before the Western world, but this is not new at all. God planned all of this. So that's that's something. I mean, this is how I feel that as the life and legacy coach, I can present this to anybody because this is what God put into place and in the universal mind, so that the one substance manifests itself, and that one substance is God. That's where it all comes from. A point that I'd like to make about these philosophies by the people that I mentioned, I can say Hegel and Emerson, Schopenhauer, Leibniz, Spinoza, and Descartes. And these people, I would say so many times when we read a book like this, we race beyond names like this and we don't visit them. But it's like when you're reading a book and you see a term that you're not familiar with, you should underline it, highlight it, write it out on a 3x5 card, go to the dictionary online right away and get that definition, learn it, and then start using it in your conversation. So with these names, these people, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look into at least a little bit of them. I recognize Emerson, but these other names are, I've heard them in the past, but I don't know much about them. So that's going to be my assignment. And then he talks about how he actually has created a series of articles under the title of What is Truth. So I would try to find those articles and read those too. And it's just a regular, what I want to do is learn more about Wallace D. Wattles, because what makes up his mind, how he came to these particular things, and really learn of him, because like when you're looking at a painting, you can appreciate the painting, but when you learn about the artist, you can appreciate that painting even more. So he sacrificed all the considerations to plainness and simplicity of style so that all might understand. And as an author myself, when I write books, I try to make them as plain and simple as possible. And there are certainly a lot of books on this same order. One of them is a book called It Works. And if you haven't seen it, I will be doing a series on that particular book as well. And he mentions those two words here in the first chapter, which I thought was pretty interesting because that kind of jumped out at me. So let's take a look at this first chapter. And right away he talks about poverty. And I teach people to live a life and leave a legacy. One of the things, as far as manifesting, is that we want to think about what we desire, and we don't want to think about necessarily where we're at. So we don't necessarily want to look at our environment, and we don't want to go into an environment that is something that we don't desire. Like, for instance, instead of going to a thrift store all of the time, that is telling our subconscious that we can't afford nice clothes or nice things, and that's why we're in that thrift store. So what we need to do is tell ourselves when we are in a thrift store that I'm here to get old books and those sort of things. And then other times we might want to treat ourselves by going to a very, very expensive restaurant. And what we'll do is just have a cup of coffee or something, or we might save up and treat ourselves and congratulate ourselves if we've done something that we feel worthy. Then we can eat a nice meal at a nice restaurant. So you want to live it. And so anyway, poverty, I don't know. I think a lot of people listening to this have either been in poverty, been broke, which is certainly a step up from poverty, or have seen poverty. And maybe many of us that are listening to this were working to get rid of poverty. But the Bible says that the poor will always be among us. And it's interesting because in the years that I've lived, I realized that it really is our own personal responsibility to pull ourselves up out of poverty. And that's what he's talking about here too. So the fact remains that it is not possible to live a really complete or successful life unless one is rich. And you can't rise to your greatest possible height in talent or soul development. And I'm saying you can't reach your destination unless you have plenty of money. Now, he talks about developing ourselves in mind, soul, and body and making use of these things. And I was thinking too, think of a tree, an oak tree. If that tree has water and the nutrients in the soil and the air and the sunlight, that tree can live its full meaning. And if we think of ourselves too as a being in nature, we too have the right to be just like that tree. We have all of the nutrients, we have the sunlight, we have the things that are necessary to accept our desires. So we can be like that tree and we can reach into the sky as high and as much as we possibly can. The desire for riches is really the desire for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life. And that desire is praiseworthy. And I know that a lot of people, they will limit their thinking and they say, you know what, I'm fine where I'm at. But, or they'll say that, you know what, rich, it just doesn't mean money. Well, yes, that is right. It doesn't just mean money. And what Waddles is talking about here is pretty much money. But with money comes that richer, fuller, and more abundant life. And so that's the desire that is praiseworthy. So we live for the body, we live for the mind, and we live for the soul. And it's like, I think of living for the soul, I think of brothers and sisters in the Lord that say, you know what, I've accepted Christ as my Savior, I'm going to heaven, but they live in hell between now and death. So they're maybe living for the soul, but they're not living for their body, and they're not living for their mind. I see so many people that love God, they're Christians, they will spend eternal life after they die. But in the meantime, their body is suffering so terribly. It doesn't have to be. And they're not doing anything to better their mind. And when one betters his or her mind, they're going to better everything else in their life. They're going to better their body, and they're going to better their soul. They're going to better everything about their life. So those are definitely the three things that make up life: the body, the mind, and the soul. And no one of these is better or more holier than the other. And that's a really good point. So it's like a triangle. And we cannot fully live with the body without food and everything else that he talked about. And it's the same thing with the mind, and it's the same thing with the soul. And so it is perfectly right that we should desire to be rich. And the reason for this is we can't help wanting so, because to be rich, to desire to be rich, is to desire all that we can possibly be. Somebody who doesn't desire to be rich is slack in developing their talent and their potential in other areas. And these people that don't want to be rich are also people that are satisfied to just sit on the couch and not live their fullest. So live your fullest. Want to be rich in all different areas. But again, Waddles is talking about money, because when you have money, then you can do these other things. If you have a relative that needs help and you've got money, you can help a lot of times with money. Now, if somebody's sick and money's not going to heal them, but yes, money can heal them. Money can help get the best doctors and the best hospitals. But this is something that it's just a really big thing, and it's pretty advanced. But I put together what I call the major eight, and money happens to be one of the major eight. But it's all eight things are equally important. But when you have money and everything is fine there, you don't have disease in the body because you're not being stressed about bills, okay? So that's going to heal your body. And so what happens is all parts of the major eight are running. It's like running on all eight cylinders. So anyway, we'll get into that. You probably have seen some of my other information about the major eight. This is the track that I use to coach and to help people get their desires and determine their destiny and live their destiny in a life that is rich and full of balance and abundance. So getting back to this, we're almost done with chapter 1. Just a couple more points that I wanted to make about this. So it is perfectly right that we should desire to be rich. If we're a normal person, we can't help doing so. If we're a normal tree, think of this. A tree is growing. That tree wants to reach and grow to its fullest capacity, to spread its branches and to reach into the sky as far as it possibly can. And that should be the same with us. And so it's perfectly right that we should give our best attention to this science of getting rich. It is the noblest and most necessary of all studies. And I don't know, I think it'll be this way from now. It's been this way since the beginning of history through today. And I think it'll continue till the end of time. Because, and what I'm talking about is poverty. The poor will always be among you. And the other thing is, part of the reason is that it's a study and it's necessary, but it isn't trained in our schools. But guess what? It is trained by the aristocrats. It is trained by the richest people in the world. That's like, again, getting back to the movie The Secret. A lot of people knew about The Secret, but they didn't want to pass it down to the common person. So with our time together here and studying the science of getting rich in these different modules, you're going to open up your mind to have a financial intelligence, and you're going to increase that financial intelligence. And as you do so, you're going to increase everything else in your life. You're going to be happy, you're going to be healthy, you're going to be richer in money, but you're going to be richer in relationships and richer in people. And when all of these things are good, you're going to feel good and you're going to live good. You're going to live richly. So again, this is Tara Scott, the Life and Legacy Coach, and we're working with the science of getting rich. And I teach people how to live life and leave a legacy. And I hope that you're getting a little bit of that here too today with me, and that you'll come back and continue the rest of these. It's been great chatting with you. Make it a great day, and we'll talk really soon. Bye for now.